Hello? Beep, 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 beep. How you doing, peeps? Right, here's what I've got for you, right? That fool Barry, he's taking the fight to LinkedIn. So what we've got here for you to peruse and have a look at is him on LinkedIn. So we're after your opinions. Give us your wise words of wisdom and tell me whether or not you think that taking the fight to LinkedIn looks like what follows. I'll see you later. Stick it in the comments. I need to know whether Barry's being a fool. I'll see you later, good folks. Watch and let me know. Good morning, LinkedIn. How are we? What a morning. My electric's gone. And then it's back on. So I've got no heating. It's not, because it hasn't kicked in yet. And it's still terribly cold. I'm desperate for some spring. And I'm sure that many of you are too. I've been on LinkedIn all of about 36 hours now. And thank you very much for your messages of greetings and welcomes. Always nice to have that from people. And also to connect with folks that are working in similar situations to myself. And for the couple of phone calls I had last night, which were fascinating to talk to people about the current situation regarding EDI, DEI, DIE, social emotional learning, unconscious bias, implicit bias, whatever it is. They've changed the title of this particular rubbish too in order to get the next gullible corporate fool. There's a huge disconnect here, folks, a huge one. And I'm not quite sure how it's going to get what does one do with a disconnect? How it's going to get connected or how it's going to be resolved. But there is a massive disconnect between the people that are in the world of business and the actual reality of what is coming. And I think it's important that we begin to discuss this on LinkedIn because it will have an effect on business. It will have an effect on organizations. The first, I suppose, the most important thing to recognize is that it is now being seen that EDI, DEI, and all its various masks, and that's a word that I will use specifically, are in fact a cover for a deeply political, hard left, body damaging, civilization usurping, boondoggle, money making scam. So it's going to be interesting to see how this is really worked out in the business sphere, because we seem to have, it appears, a bunch of corporate virtue signaling fools who seem to think that virtue signaling about race and about sexuality and gender identity, which is something that doesn't exist, by the way, is okay. Well, I think this is going to make things difficult moving forward because the public is waking up at a rate of knots. I've had more than 14 phone calls in the last 72 hours. 14 phone calls in the last 72 hours, which I've spoken to people who have children that have been directly affected by the kind of lies and the kind of games that are being played by practitioners in the EDI and the DIE field. Now, we split on this. Some of the people that I know on LinkedIn, some of the people I've spoken to split on this, in that some people think it's savable, which it may well be, EDI, done in a different way, and some people, like me, who think the whole entire edifice should be burnt to the ground. So there's a war coming, people, around this particular idea. And I personally think it should probably go the way of all the other rubbish that we've got rid of in the last few years, such as learning styles and VAC, visual audio kinesthetic, and the fact that psychometrics tells you little or nothing. So unless we begin to embrace, I think, as those of us that work in the field of HR, or learning and development, unless we begin to embrace the reality of the situation, is that we are surrounded by, under attack by, and completely drowning in cowboys and cowgirls who are just full of nonsense. So it's going to be an interesting one. I'm looking forward to hearing from you about whether you think this is a thing. I certainly do. We now know, for example, that the LGBTQI2AS, or whatever it is they've added to it today, has more than a few dark corners to it. And if you don't know what those dark corners are, I strongly suggest that you do your work around Judith Butler and queer theory, because I'm seeing organisations and individuals espousing the idea of queer as if there's anything about it that isn't reprehensible. There's also now the situation where we're obviously getting the LGB is removing itself from the LGBTQIA and saying this has nothing to do with being gay. It doesn't have anything to do with being gay. It has nothing to do with being lesbian. You cannot be a supporter of TQ plus and a supporter of gays and lesbians. It is impossible. They are oil and water. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that they are dynamite and a lighter. Put the two together and you're going to have real problems. And oh look, we have. The fact that people have a sexuality in which they love people of the same sex has got nothing to do with A, LARPing men who cross-dress for a sexual fetish, confused young girls, or effeminate young boys who happen to be at the risk of being predated on by the likes of WPATH and those organisations who provide services based on the idea that trans is actually a thing. Okay, it's not. We now know that it's a symptom. It's a symptom of further malaise. That there is usually, within an ideation, the trans ideation, there is usually abuse. They're either autistic, ADHD, looked after kids, but most of all, they will either be gay or lesbian when they grow up, and they usually desist from their trans ideation, and that they need to be left alone and certainly do not need to be offered any kind of medical help on this regard, because there is no need for medical help. It is not a medical condition, it is a psychological one. So this is happening. But yet we still see the corporates going, oh, I'm so proud I've done this day for asexual furry people, or whatever it is they choose to do. They're still doing it. Good luck. Because I tell you now, I wouldn't want to be a few things right now, but one of them is I wouldn't want to be a teacher. Because if you're a teacher and you've got this wrong, the lawsuits are going to kick you in the bottom. There is no two ways about it. They're going to kick you in the bottom. Now, we're already seeing in America, there's a move to get individual teachers prosecuted for teaching gender identity ideology and transgenderism. So that's a very interesting one. Secondly, I think what we're going to see is schools sued by parents who have lied to parents and hidden their child's illness from the parents. The school teachers themselves making a diagnosis, aren't you wonderful, you're trans. I wouldn't want to be a school teacher. The second thing I wouldn't want to be is a corporate HR person who's steeped themselves in this utter political and cultural garbage to such an extent that they're going to have a job rolling back. Now, if I go into work, say I go into work for the day, like we all do, we get up, we get dressed, we have a coffee, and off we go. You go into work for the day, and you get in there, and there's some LARPing bloke in a dress, or worse still, your organisation's sending you on training about implicit bias and how you can be an ally to the LGBTQ and the gender identity crowd. This is hard left, neo-Marxist, dangerous political ideology. If I was you, I'd be lawyering up, because the Free Speech Union, who I happen to be a member of and who are very active in this space, are going to be coming for you. So I think we're going to open up a number of avenues that will help us to square this, to get this sorted, which is that individuals are going to be able to sue their bosses for attempting to indoctrinate them and for interfering with their private life. So that's going to be an interesting one. And secondly, that we ensure the elevation of an individual group. So let's say, for example, in work, we put pronouns in your emails. Well, you're only doing that for people that are ill, that think they're the opposite sex. So you're only doing that for LARPing men or LARPing women who pretended to be something they're not. And it's incredibly homophobic at any rate. So the homophobia inherent in putting pronouns. And so somebody's going to go, why are you elevating one individual over another? Especially when, for example, I'm a gay man, you're doing what for somebody that's not a protected characteristic? Being trans is not a protected characteristic. It's not, right? Gender reassignment is a protected characteristic. That's a different thing altogether, right? So these claims of being a trans is a collective noun. So we're going to have to define our terms. Me as a gay man, if you elevate somebody who's not a protected characteristic, if you elevate them above the protected characteristics and don't use the Equality Act for what it's for, which is to protect the individual and to provide an equal playground for opportunity, then you are going to find yourself being sued. If you've got affinity groups in your organisation, or we've got our LGBTQ club meets after work on Friday at 4. If you've got affinity groups, whether it be for that or BIPOC or BAME or any other of the ridiculous identity categories that these money-grubbing liars are telling you is a good idea, then I suggest you lawyer up, because you are going to get sued. Because if you're elevating them and not elevating somebody else, for example, people with disability, or gay people, or females, or the protected characteristic of sex, then I suggest that you are going to lose money very shortly, that you are going to get sued. It's just a matter of getting the right case. That's all. It's just about, we've already got Forstater, very important case, Forstater, and there's a number that follow that. So if I was you, if I was a business, don't embrace this stuff. Don't get yourself involved with Stonewall. Don't elevate anybody. Keep the Equality Act in the background and get on with your job and make some money. Or get on with your job and provide a service to the public, which your organisation is there to do. It's going to be fascinating to watch this begin to unfold. And I think it's really important right now that organisations divest themselves of EDI and DIE and all the rubbish that comes with it about LGBTQ and do it as quickly as they possibly can. It's time to get back to doing business rather than doing politics with hard left, neo-Marxist, absolute Fruit Loops. So it's going to be fascinating. And I hope that you on LinkedIn can engage with this idea and tell me, how do we do it? How do we remove this tick-like beast from the body of business and organisations? I'd really love to hear from you in your comments here about how we do that and how do we ensure that people are not fooled by these charlatans again. So good morning, LinkedIn. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea because it's cold. I'll see you later. Great to be back. Hello LinkedIn, and I hope you're all well today. Welcome once again. It would be, I think, efficacious for some of you who've asked a couple of questions on the back of a few things that I've been saying and on the back of discovering various activities around the winning mindset and the Edijester in regards to if you're an organisation or a business that finds themselves caught in the identity politics game of EDI and DIE. So here's just some very swift pointers to help you think about how you might divest your organisation or your business of this particular tick, this particular ideology. So the first thing that I recommend is that you have an audit of all the organisation's activities. And in doing so, you will be looking for the language of EDI and DEI to ensure that that is the first thing that's erased from all your work. So for example, unconscious bias would be one, talking about things like pregnant people or pregnant persons rather than the word woman, anything that pertains to implying that, for example, sex is assigned at birth as opposed to being observed in utero, and alongside that, various other words. So you need to know the lexicon. I've got it, by the way. You need to know the lexicon so that you can start to look and say, this language will not be used because it is the language of a particular cult-like behaviour. So the first thing there for you very quickly, look at your language. Look at your argot, which is the language of your business. Look at your argot and eradicate this from that. The second thing is that you must immediately cease all infinity groups. No, it's not infinity, affinity groups. So for example, the LGBTQIA plus group, the BAME group, the BIPOC group, whatever it may be group that is based around identity rather than individuals. If people want to put together a badminton group, feel free. That's not the same thing at all. So the next thing is to disband all identity groups. That's point 2. Point 3 is to carry out a full audit of the work of the HR department and to look to see where the HR department has been going with this and ensure that the HR department is not staffed by people who are activists in this particular field. Then you'll need to reduce HR down to practically nothing. That's the best way to start. What I would then suggest is, so next point for you, I would suggest is that you have, instead of an HR department, an organisational development department. And any subsequent HR activities is subsumed under that and kept to the minimum at all times. So an organisational department is what you want, organisational development department, because that's what you're going to do. Looking forward, we're going to look forward as opposed to looking up our own, whatever it may be, and see how we can actually move away from this. And then you need to begin looking at what is going to be the activities that the organisational development department are going to take part in, which may well be recognising that the education system has let business down and you're going to have to start doing some education for its own sake, i.e. replace all of this unconscious bias and BAME and allyship programs, all of the stuff that's the rubbish that's being done, you need to replace with critical thinking. Critical thinking, understanding the cultural zeitgeist, being able to interpret media because we live in a media-drenched landscape now, folks. Or perhaps even looking towards how will leadership be now? Should there be empowerment in leadership? And will you be taking a much more humanist approach to your business and organisational work than you currently are? what will you be able to remove that is likely to put you at legal risk? So there's the next thing. So these are just very simple, short ideas in a 3.5, 4 minute video that you might want to embrace. So start thinking about these things, and please do let me know in the comments how you think this might go. We might go about doing this, because it's time for change, and we need a whole new curriculum for business that is going to reassert the importance of getting together to learn, and of learning in a way that is about critical thinking and enhancing the business's ability to make money, or the organization's ability to achieve its aim for the public. Okay? So you let me know, what do you think of those little points? I'll see you later.